Hello and welcome back to Hoi 4, Equestria War, the realm of Kiria, under Rainshine. And in today's episode, before we start doing nations, funnily enough, I think I've been roleplaying quite well because I've been so engrossed with my own nation. I didn't even realize that this is whatever weirdness is happening here. And also, well, our ex-puppet guys in the south are fighting. The Lankir military has defeated the, Kamiran down here, and now these guys are fighting, and looking at their army strength, well, it makes sense that the one that's already angry would be the strongest militarily. In fact, they could, looking at their military strength compared to mine, they could probably beat me right now, so that's always a good sign. Though, to be fair, my military absolutely sucks right now, so... I don't even have, things at all. Let me go ahead and start working on my military at least a little bit. There we go. Breakneck industrialization. Rapid industrialization of our realm, a rate never seen anywhere else in the world, has come with its own host of challenges. One of the most critical of these is the need for skilled and unskilled labor, and we've gone to great lengths to obtain workers for our modern society. But bringing so many Kirin to one place to work for the gears of capitalism comes the risk of radical leftist ideas spreading around. Breakneck industrialization. I mean, our stability has only gone up. We've only became a more stable society. Sure, it's mostly through just repeatedly replying to letters. Just repeatedly being like, hey, I got, send me a letter, send me a letter. Hey, here's some replies, and apparently, just sending replies to people makes them way more stable. The bourgeoisie and the proletariat. The picket lines has already been erected around the factory by the time Fickle Current's automobile pulled up in the front of it, with dozens of Kirin workers standing behind them. They held signs and chanted slogans, and one of them had gathered a sizable pile of rocks that could easily be turned into missiles at a moment's notice. Though soot and smog hung in the fragrant air, the factory behind them was unmistakably silent. The gears of modernity ground to a halt by the striking workers. Current frowned and stepped out of the car, moving along behind the cordon of private detectives and security staff that had assembled to face the striking workers. He found Cypress Snow watching from a vantage point, a similarly displeased look on his face. The two nodded each other in greetings, and then both turned their attention to the striking workers. They don't have any rising fire priests with them, Fickle noted. It's not the communalist heretics this time, Cypress said, shaking his head. It's just some workers unionizing and sharing subversive leftist literature. There are a few rabble-rousers operating within the city who might have imported it from Stalingrad, Prywa, Skynavia. Not that where it came from really matters. What matters is these ideas are spreading in the city and filling their heads with nonsense. Then it looks like the rising fire has a modern competitor, and we have a nuisance to deal with. The sight of the protesting workers and the sounds of their chants took Current back to his days in Skyfall, where he had seen similar unrest play out before. We know the playbook then. This is nothing we haven't dealt with in Skyfall. Right, we bring in scabs from someplace rural and tell them they're getting good paying jobs, which will let the factory get cheap replacements for the strikers. Then we pick the squatters out and crack some skulls if we have to. The company's pockets are deep enough to get some mercenaries together for a raid. Maybe Sicey will be willing to part with some of its marines for a bit. Cypress then turned to Fickle and frowned. But we have to get control of this now and stamp this movement out at the source before it gets worse. We know how this goes, because we've seen it before. We'll have to be proactive here. Whatever subversive is stirring up the workers up, and deal with them. The last thing we need is to lose fragrance to the polls. Radical Marxists will never have a home in fragrance. Whatever you say. I mean... Alright. Now, we've already read this one, because we were going to do it, and then we were like, ooh, we can do this, and then we did that instead. In fact, I think next I'm doing this. Yeah, I think it's time to start working on military factories next. Whoa. Calm. The poisoned lifeblood of Kiria. The horrific reek of sewage and pollution struck Autumn Blaze like a slap to the face as soon as she stepped out of the train car in Verdant's train station. Even a few hundred meters from the shoreline, the Greek mellifluve stank like a rotting fish and foul eggs. Cinderglow gagged as she followed Autumn off the train, and she quickly pinched her nose shut with cleft hoof. "Phew, that smells horrific," she touted over the hiss, and with of the steam engines behind them, what crawled up Concord's divine rear and died. "This is terrible," Autumn said, wincing as she made her way from the train station towards the river. Sickly Kieran dotted the streets, leaning against the walls and grimacing, while others briskly trotted to where they needed to go, noses covered with cloth, masked to keep out the stench as best they could. When the delegation from Vermilion arrived on the shores of the Great Mellifluve, they found them covered with dead and rotting fish, the once blue waters of Kiria's lifeblood a sickly green and black. To their horror, they saw a few Kieran on one of the island's communes of Verdant dropping buckets into the poisoned water to bring back to their homes. It was little wonder Verdant was so full of sickly and starving Kieran. "The factories upstream are causing this," Autumn said. "I read reports they were dumping industrial waste into Mellifluve, but I didn't imagine it was this bad." "It's not just the factories either," Cinder remarked. "Farmers are dumping fertilizer into their fields, and it's running all off the rain. And the cities are exploding in population. They don't have anything near robust enough sewage systems to deal with all the waste. All of that is getting dumped into the river, and it flows downstream to Verdant. We have to step in and do something to stop this," Autumn decided. "We can't let these Kieran languish like this. The population is killing them. Or the pollution is killing them. The population is killing them." And if we don't do something about it, it'll kill Verdant itself. If we don't save the lifeblood of Kiria, then our nation will die. Yeah, I definitely have the political power for this. Yep, most certainly, yep. Absolutely, plenty of political power. Give me an event that gives me like 150 political power, please. Come on. Please. Don't make me, like, cheat or something. Please. Do it. You got this. Actually, I could have that won't even give me enough, and it's too slow. That wouldn't even be good enough, so, you know. Please. Give me an event. Do it. That's not a good event. Pond Frog looked up from the flooded rows of the rice paddy as the hulking junk sailed into the mouth of the Great Mellifluve, using the southerly winds to force themselves about 200 meters upstream before lowering their red sails and dropping anchor. The ships arrived in 3 ranks, with the first and third lines turning their bows towards the shore and arranging their broadsides up and down the river, and the second rank oriented north and south with their guns trained on the shore. There they sat, and they waited, their red hulls practically glowing like fire in the morning sun as the blockade settled in. It did not take them long to ensnare their first victim. A merchant ship sailing down the river was forced to turn to port and drop its anchor to pivot before reaching the blockade. Before it could open its sails and catch the wind to sail upriver again, longships launched from the junks roaring out to it and stormed the ship. Within minutes, the crew was subdued, and the captured ship was sailed in the protective embrace of the pirate blockade, where it was anchored until a treasure fleet could be amassed and sailed away to safety. As the hours rolled on, ship after ship fell into the same trap, with even ships sailing up the river from South Kirin Sea to Verdant falling victim. By the end of the day, and by the time Pond Frog finally was ready to go home, the pirates had amassed 17 ships in their protective bubble. The farmer simply shook his head as he packed up his tools and waded out of the flooded fields. At least the pirates had more valuable prizes to keep them entertained than rice. To the merchants and their ships, the appearance of a blockade in the Great Malfluve had likely been a horrific surprise, but to Pond Frog it was nothing new. Kiria had been a broken and defunct country when his father was a fool, and his father's father before him. Nothing had changed, despite all the talk coming out from the capital. The realm was still broken, and Pond Frog didn't see it getting fixed anytime soon. Pirate strangling lifeblood of Kiria will soon strangle the life out of its reforms. The Banners of Vermilion. Rainshine stood in the massive plaza on the open-air Verges Rotunda, outside of the Imperial Palace, counting the numerous colorful feathered banners fluttering in the slight breeze of the dreary day. A small drizzle had settled over Vermilion, and 2 of her palace servants used their magic to keep the rain off of her regal body. But the Kirin assembled in the plaza before her stood tall, stoic, and proud. Some were young, barely more than colts and fillies, while some were older, their scales weathered and cracked with the passage of time. But one thing drew them all together, and those were the colorful banners they rallied around. "You few, you proud, gallant few," Rainshide began, addressing the crowd with a respectful dip of her head. "You are the children, grandchildren, or even great-grandchildren of the last soldier to serve in our mother's 1,000 banners. Your ancestors served well in 1,000 banners, and were rewarded amply with land upon which to start a family when they were tired. Their children and their children's children served after them in banners. Like my own family, your families became strong military dynasties that will survive the worst the world can throw at them, even something like the Silence." Her eyes shifted to look out on the plaza, noting all the empty spaces unoccupied by the tiny gathering of Kirin in front of her. "I summoned you here through imperial decree because it is time to rebuild the 1,000 banners of Vermilion. You will be the first to serve me, should you choose to follow in the hoof steps of your ancestors. You will be made captains and officers, and you will protect the realm from any threats, just as your forebears did. There are not 1,000 banners standing before me, true, but I look forward to the day when the Rotunda is filled with a thousand colorful banners, like a rainbow fallen onto the earth. But the first banners, they will be yours, and they will be honored by the Concord's blessing. So I ask you, Kirin of the Realm, who will step forward and serve their matriarch?" She did not have to wait long for a response. One by one, the Kirin under her each banner stepped forward, carrying their banners with them for Rainshide to bless with a touch of her magic. One by one they knelt before her and swore the oaths to the realm, just as their ancestors once did long ago, and one by one Kiria earned its banners back on that day. Today 100 banners, tomorrow 1,000. Recommission the Raspedy Arsenal. The Raspedy Arsenal was once the forefront of Kirin weapons inventions and gained fame across eastern Zebrika for the quality of the cannons they manufactured. But for a century now, the arsenal has been closed and abandoned. It is time to reopen the Raspedy Arsenal and combine the inventions of the modern era with the ingenuity of the Kirin that once made it so renowned. Yes, of course. Banditry in the West. Oh good, another bad event. The plenum now gives the floor to Governor Ambergrain of the Auspicious Clouds Province. Autumn Blaze watched as the governor made her way to the center of Plenum's chamber to speak. The mayor must have been in her late 60s, but she carried herself with a fire and brimstone air about her that made her seem imposing and youthful despite her age, and she wasted no time launching into the reason why she had requested the audience with the Plenum in the first place. "My province is in chaos and lawlessness," she snapped, harsh eyes sweeping over the assembled delegates as if they were axes and the Kirin were trees. "Bandits are emerging from the countryside to prey on our new flows of trade and commerce, which were dead for so long. They attack Kirin on the roads in broad daylight because they know no Kirin will stop them. Where is the Vermilion Banner Army? Where are the soldiers? Things are too out of hoof for my constabulary to handle on its own. My province, as well as the rest of the western provinces, need direct action from the army." Yesterday. "The grand gallop onwards should be modernizing the countryside and providing Kirin with better jobs and more opportunities than ever before," Fickle Current countered. "The only reason there would be bandit problem would be because of misuse of fund and aid the Plenum had sent the provinces." Amber Grain scowled at him. "You were born wearing that suit, weren't you?" She snapped at him. "If you spent one single day of your life toiling in the fields or working in one of those death traps you call factories, you'd understand why Kirin are turning to banditry. All these companies buying up and reshuffling farmland is displacing farmers off of land their families have worked for generations, and half of them won't even go into cities to work in factories when they see them maimed and much mutilated begging for tails in the streets because they lost hooves or horns on the job. And the foreigners there work their labor to the bones for little more than a teal an hour, with no protections and no rights. What else is a Kirin without skills to do but turn to banditry? So until you fix that up, the West needs soldiers if you're going to deal with the bandit problem. We have to secure the West from bandits if you want the grand gallop onward to be successful. Yes, it must be done." Now, I am willing to cheat to do it. Recall, rearm, regroup. Reassembling the banners was a start, but there are currently too few Kirin who have answered the call to form a functional modern military. We must start by organizing limited conscription and drafting peasants and commoners to create regional militias that, with proper training, may one day join the banners and provide the backbone for our modern army. Banditry in the West. Bandits have long been a problem in more rural and unsettled lands in the west of our realm, but throughout the period of modernization they've grown even more troublesome. Caravans and convoys bring much needed supplies and goods to the west and are frequently attacked by them before they attacked by bandits, and we simply must do something about them before they jeopardize our ongoing modernization efforts in the backwaters of the realm. The lifeblood of Kiria, the great Malafluve, is the river that brings life to our beautiful realm and facilitates trade throughout its fertile valleys and lush forests. But while the great Malafluve gives us life, we are inadvertently killing it. Our modernization projects have resulted in factories dumping toxic chemicals into the rivers to mingle with fertile runoff and sewage from our growing cities. If the great Malafluve dies, then Kiria dies. There is no time to waste in finding a solution. So I'm just going to don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Everything is fine. Don't worry about it. But, you know, I will be doing another playthrough as this. But I want, you know, for this first playthrough, I don't care if it's kind of cheating-y. I want to see all the events, okay? And this gives events, so I'm doing it, okay? We're seeing the events. The last sunrise of sunrise. Matriarch's superior Rainshine retreated to her study after her lunch, a worrying thought pricking at the back of her mind. Ever since Emberwain had come to her seeking recognition for the banner of the covered cage, her thoughts were troubled by what her premier had said and what that meant for her realm. Had this paramilitary group really been operating without limits and without check for this long? It bothered her that she knew so little about them, and they were apparently organized by her mother and had been operating under command for decades. Now they claimed to be loyal to her as Kiria's ruling matriarch. They could be useful, there was no doubt, but Unblaze hadn't made it clear that working with them was a double-edged sword and would come with its own host of problems. Chief among them was a record she found in a tattered scroll that reported on their progress to her mother. Though it was short and laced with jargon, Rainshine was able to suss out the real story inside of the banner's report. It detailed an intervention in the town of Sunrise, and how quick and decisive action by the banner had dismantled the heretical society inside of Sunrise. It sounded so clean on paper, but when Rainshine brought up other reports and letters that had been sent around the time of the banner's action, it painted a far bloodier story. Sunrise had once been a home to a millenarian sect of the Way of Fire, who believed that the Vermilion dynasty had failed Kiria, and that Concord could never be so cruel as to punish the entire realm with something as harsh as the silence. Instead, they believed that the Vermilion dynasty had acted out of corruption and greed, and smothered Kiria with the silence in its lust for absolute power. But at the turn of the millennium, Concord would bestow a new avatar on Kiria to overthrow the Vermilion dynasty and return Kiria to greatness. And so the town and its inhabitants refused to follow the decrees of the silence and prepared for the new avatar's arrival. But by all accords of the time, what few there were, the city of Sunrise was peaceful and prosperous, open to sharing its wealth with its neighbors, and had modernized in its own way, at least until the banner of the covered cage descended on the town. The inhabitants were slaughtered to the last for charges of heresy and defiance of the silence, and the entire town put to the torch. All this the banner had done in the name of the matriarch in Concord, and though the story had become something of a folk tale in Kieran society, the re-emergence of the covered cage would surely reignite these stories and fill the peasants and farmers of Kiria with outrage. It left Rainshine at a terrible impasse. She didn't know what she to do about the story of Sunrise and the banner of covered cage. Should she come clean to her subjects, apologize of her decade old massacre, and condemn the acts of the covered cage, or should she suppress the incident as best she could in the hope of maintaining peace and calm? The realm must come clean about its past if it wants to move forward. Sooner or later, the truth shall emerge. The knowledge of what happened to Sunrise would do more harm than good. Ooh. Well, you know what I just said. This is definitely the smarter move, 100%. But this sounds like it would lead to events, so we're doing it. Take that as my apology for having to cheat a little. Harmony with nature. Plus, it makes me not a hypocrite. I'm, going for events, no matter what. Autumn Blaze and Winter Frost watched side by side as 5 priests and priestesses of the Way of Fire led a procession of followers down to the banks of the Great Malafluve outside of Vermilion. Singing, chanting, and simple music tapped out of a drum and chimes accompanied them down to the water's edge, where the assembled Kieran waded out of the blue waters of Kira's lifeblood. Autumn, for her part, was just happy to see the clear blue of the water return it once again. The poison in the rivers was receding, and Verdant had always made great strides in recovering downstream. It was something that the Plenum and the Morning Secretariat could be proud of, at least. Well, maybe not Ficklecurrent and his cronies, but the rest of Kiria. It's still not as clear as I remember it, for Winterfrost solemnly noted, her eyes wandering away from the ceremony and towards the deepest blue of the river. There's still poison in our lifeblood, just less of it. Completely eliminating the pollution was an impossible order, Autumn explained. We would have to cease our modernization completely. You know we can't do that. Kiria needs this modernization to rejoin the world. But we could at least limit how much factories could dump into the river and force them to explore other means of dealing with their waste. She hesitated before adding, "Thank you for convincing the mystics of the Way of Fire to support our efforts. We wouldn't have been able to do it without them." "The 6th tenet of the Way of Fire says we must live in peace and harmony with nature," the priest said. "This is not harmony, but perhaps it is peace. If the future children of Kiria can benefit from what we do today, then I will sleep easier for having my mystics find compromise outside of Concord's divine wisdom." As the chanting on the water came to a close, 2 of the priests waded back to the shoreline and set fire to the fuses protruding from a rack of fireworks. One after the other, the fireworks shot into the air with colorful sparks and briefly dazzling displays of light. Winterfrost bowed her head at the display of thanks to Concord, and Autumn did the same after a moment. It was the perfect end to a peaceful day, and Autumn was thankful that she and Winter could share it in a friendly company instead of as bitter rivals on the plenum floor. "We can work together to make a harmonious and prosperous Kiria yet." Hopefully. Hopefully we're not just ruining it completely. That wouldn't be great. Oh wow, we're gonna get another journal soon, I guess. It's been a little while. Kirin rifle designs. Our species is blessed by Concord in that every individual can use basic telekinesis to manipulate objects and hold weapons. We can use this gift that we have been blessed with to create weapons ideal for our species that only we can use, rather than relying on the designs of other nations. If we want to create a functional modern army, then we need guns made here at home, and we need a lot of them. Yes, of course. A new standard or an old banner? Autumn Blaze would be the first Kirin to admit she had no experience with the art of war, and so she had long tried to put matters of warfare into the hooves of experienced and studied Kirin she could trust. But the newest dilemma on her desk was one that she had to attend to personally as the Imperial Premier. With the modernization of the country and the dawning reality that the role the realm had returned to was even more dangerous than when it had cut ties with a century ago, Kiria was in desperate need of a modern, functional, and supplied army to protect its borders. That left Autumn, as its premier and effective head of government, in dire need of a solution to bolster the banners and provide for Kiria's security throughout the process. Autumn tapped her pen to her lips as she tried to recall what she'd learned at her last meeting with the officials of the Vermilion Banner Army. And that was when an idea came to her. On the western border with the zebra natives and the griffin colonizers existed many regional militias that had maintained their military traditions throughout the Science to protect their lands from raids across the river. They were antiquated and fought with swords and outdated battle tactics, but they were organized, well-trained, and had a strong identity as warrior Kirin. Better yet, when the news of the Grand Gallop onward reached the western border, they had immediately reaffirmed their oaths of loyalty to Vermilion and Matriarch Rainshine. There was a possibility in here to do something with them and bolster the army as a whole. Autumn snatched a sheet of paper off her desk and prepared to write down a proposal for the Reform Bureau, but she hesitated before putting ink on paper. These units were hardly top of the line. What they possessed in discipline, they lacked in equipment and modern discipline, or not modern doctrine. Would it be better to let them keep their organization as autonomous military units and adopt them into the Banner Army, or dissolve and disperse them and to integrate them into the growing banners as a whole? Keeping them together would please the martial families of the West, but it would also hurt the spread of new ideas. But dispersing them into the army would allow them to be better trained and more efficiently used. The mixture of ideas from throughout the realm would help dilute any bias of the Western soldiers. The Rising Fire was very popular in the West, after all, and it could be a risky endeavor to let those beliefs grow unchecked. The Banner Army needs to be bolstered with existing units. 3 banners of Frontier Militia will be incorporated. Banner of the Sisterhood, Banner of the Brotherhood, Banner of the Braves. You get command power, army experience, pony power, and infantry. I'm just gonna dissolve them and train them. That seems fine. Alright. And there we go. But I think this is a good time to go ahead and end this episode. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, like, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell button. And, as always, peace.